And just like that, movie night has survived into its 4th week. We're all rejoicing. It's still alive. Now, this one's a little late again. But I have become aware. I have self-discovered that from now on, movie night could really be whenever we want. We just wanted to establish it for 3 weeks that it was happening. I might watch Gaslight tonight and upload the next one tomorrow. Gaslight will be our next movie, by the way. Gaslight 1944, I think it is. A big-time movie. It has the girl from Casablanca in it, and it's probably where the term comes from. So that'll be all interesting to discover. Supposedly very good. So we usually start with what movie comes next. We haven't even mentioned that today's episode, if you can't see the title, if you couldn't see the thumbnail, if you can't see what's on screen now, is Scarface. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be getting into that. You could have seen that I had already watched it if you were either following on Twitter, where I added it to my media thread, or if you're following us on Letterboxd, and by us I mean me, well, you would also already know what I rated the movie. But nonetheless, next week, Gaslight, everybody watch it in preparation. So we can all watch along together. Brings a tear to my eye. Let me bring up my fucking notes here. Any other housekeeping things to go over beforehand? Gaslight will be next. Me and Ari have talked. Ari is back fit and healthy. Well, he's at least getting there. So, I don't know if he's interested in Gaslight, but the week after we might do like The Lighthouse or something, or one of these modern movies Ari likes. And he might jump on. Or maybe he would rather jump on a movie he hasn't seen before. We'll see. We're in talks. Ari should be here in the coming weeks, if this is still a weekly show. But nonetheless, episode 4, Scarface. I do think that's all the housekeeping shit we gotta go through. Now, as with last week, this one might not be as long as the first 2 as well, because I'm not sure I have that much to say. It might be longer than Roger Rabbit. We'll have to see as we progress. My first note here, which is kind of connected to housekeeping a little bit, is that Humphrey Bogart was mentioned in I think the first scene Tony Montana is in, which is probably the first scene of the movie, though we do have the interesting like credit roll thing at the beginning. It's not really a credit. What do you call it in Star Wars when they have the scrolling text or whatever? Text doesn't scroll, but it sort of serves the same purpose. About the Cuban immigrants and the criminality that came with them in 1980 and everything. Tells you what year the movie is set and everything. We'll get into all that shortly. But in the opening monologue with Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino, lead star of the movie, who you're looking at right now if you're looking. You're probably just listening though. He mentions how he learnt to speak English as one of the questions he's asking. He mentioned his dad took him to see the movies. Now, I'm pretty sure he's lying in most of this monologue at the beginning here, but he mentions that Humphrey Bogart was one of the movie stars that he used to watch when he was younger. And Humphrey Bogart is the lead in Casablanca. So when that was said, I was like, haha, what a cute movie night tie-in we've got here. All these movies are connected, apparently. Even next week with Gaslight will be connected to Casablanca through Ingrid, I forget her last name, but the lead girl. So that was cute. Popped me. But anyway, Scarface. We'll start with a plot recap, then we'll get into things we're talking about so we can steady ourselves. It's about the rise and fall of Tony Montana here, who is our lead again. He's a Cuban immigrant. Al Pacino's doing a Cuban accent, playing a Cuban in this movie. He's played Irishmen. He's played Italians. I'm sure he's played other races and ethnicities. Ugh. Felt like I needed to sneeze for a second, but then it disappeared. That's not a good feeling. Nonetheless, he's a Cuban in this movie. I think I knew that. I probably knew that. I'd heard Tony Montana speak before, because I had seen some scenes from this movie previously, so I knew Al Pacino was doing a funny accent. Well, maybe the Cubans might be mad at me for calling it funny. Is it a good accent? I'm not sure. I'm not Cuban. I don't think I've ever met a Cuban person to know whether or not this accent was pretty good. Though this movie's pretty popular, and one of the big talking points isn't that the accent is bad, so I assume it's pretty good. Or maybe just everybody that isn't Cuban thinks it's good, and silences the dissenting opinions. Nonetheless, he's a Cuban immigrant, ends up in America in 1980 when a bunch of, Cuban criminals, I guess, are exiled from Cuba Because there's I know a little bit about this Cuba stuff. There's embargo is what it's called, so there wasn't a lot of communication between America and Cuba, and then apparently it was lifted for a little bit in the 80s here, and they sent a bunch of people over who already had family, who had fled Fidel Castro and all that stuff, and communism. I know the gist of it, but unless he's one of the criminals that come over, which they seem to, even the border people seem to have recognized a tattoo he has on his hand that seems to indicate that he has some allegiance to criminality or the mob or the underworld or something like that. Though in that introductory scene, he's trying to play it off, and obviously we don't know the answer yet, that he's not a criminal yet. And honestly, coming in, I didn't know if he would end up becoming a criminal later or if he was beforehand. Now, we do get insight that he was in the military previously. And his mother later has said, when he presents her with money, he's like, who'd you kill for this money? So it seems like potentially he was some sort of assassin for hire back in Cuba as well, which he would become at the beginning of the movie. I guess it's all Cuban mob stuff, I was going to say, for the mob. I don't know if mob is a specific Italian word for the mafia. Mafia sounds like an Italian word. I don't know. Criminal organization, because Frank Lopez, who he works for, is also Cuban, because the first thing he does is he kills a dude for Frank Lopez. Frank Lopez, played by the actor that plays Feech LaManna in The Sopranos, because when he first showed up, I'm like, I kind of recognize the student, especially his speech pattern. I couldn't place it for 10 minutes, and then I'm like, it's fucking Feech from The Sopranos. It is crazy how all the mob movies are sort of incestual in their casting, especially, like Lorraine Bracco, easy for me to say, is obviously Karen, the lead female character in Goodfellas, and then comes back to be Dr. Melfi in The Sopranos. The Irishman seemed to have been a culmination where they got everybody together. Joe Pesci is in a movie with Al Pacino, is in a movie with Robert De Niro, and fucking Silvio shows up halfway through. Paulie Walnuts is in the beginning of Goodfellas. It's incestuous, these fucking mob films. And it's cute. But yeah, Feech LaManna was in it. I was excited when I realized. Nonetheless, they assassinate a dude, and they slowly work their way up through the empire, eventually with Frank Lopez, played by Feech. They end up coming to blows. There's a girl in the middle of it who is the main love interest in the movie, though kind of not really. We'll talk about that on two fronts as we progress, because she never really seems like she's in love with Tony, but we'll talk about that. And then Tony seems to have his eyes for another, which we'll also get into that. But yeah, there's a girl that gets in between them. Tony likes this girl, but he's the boss's girl, and then the boss ends up turning on Tony after he gets too frisky with the girl at a club, and they try to assassinate him. He then takes over the empire. He then becomes very rich. He has the cocaine. It's all about cocaine, by the way, if we somehow didn't know that. They're made rich by their cocaine dealing and importing, and not really exporting, but sales, distribution, yes, that's the word. He has the cocaine connect. The cocaine connect ends up turning on him after he fails to do an assassination at the end of the movie, and it's a rise and fall. So after Tony goes so far, gets this massive mansion that we see him in for the last half of the movie, becomes insanely rich, it looks. He then falls from grace and is killed at the end. Does the fall into the pool, which is a famous scene from the movie. It's the last shot of the movie. Because the cocaine connect, I think he's in Bolivia, ends up turning on him after he fucks him over a little bit. Is that what I got? That's basically the recap of the movie. He's introduced to the business, rises, eventually takes out Lopez in revenge for shooting up his club. I know the sneeze is coming back, but it's going away again. God damn it. That's going to be the narrative through line of this review. He also gets caught by the cops at some point. That's why he has to go and do an assassination personally of this dude who was exposing sort of the mob figures. But then he doesn't want to assassinate him because they put a bomb underneath his car. And they want to blow it up, but then his wife and kids are in the car, and Tony doesn't want to do it. What a nice bloke. Whereas the other assassins do, and he ends up killing them. That's what pisses off the Cocaine Connect in Bolivia, because he was one of the people getting exposed, and he turns on Tony and sends his goons after him at the end, who end up killing him. there is a romance with the boss's girl initially. She then becomes his wife, but they have a terrible relationship, and she just walks out of him. He also has his like second in command, Manny, who is like his friend from back in Cuba. It's like his little brother. He eventually ends up killing him when he finds out he's sleeping with his sister. It's a whole thing. He also potentially wants to sleep with his own sister. This is all something we will talk about later when we flesh out. And this is actually something I get into in my next note here is, are these the modern tragedies? Now, a lot of Shakespeare memes are tragedies. You can like separate them into histories, tragedies, and comedies. All these Shakespeare plays, apparently. At least that's what I was taught in the 11th grade. And I've always been perplexed that like the most famous ones of them are all the tragedies. And it's like, why do these fucking pissants, these peasants in the 1600s or the 1700s or whatever this prick was alive, how come they wanted to see tragedy so much? How come they don't want to hear the happy stories? And I was like, there's not really tragedies anymore. I'm like, I can't think of a tragedy story. And I think I realized that these sort of rise, fall, mob or get-rich-quick movies sort of are the modern tragedies in this sense. And they are fascinating. A lot of the other ones are some of my favorite movies. So I think I finally connected with why these were popular, because it is sort of similar in the protagonist usually dies at the end out of a folly of his own. It's sort of a tale and a warning and things like that. Devilman's like that. Bring up Devilman every time, no matter what you're talking about. It'll be relevant in some manner or facet, and I put them together. Creating new words here on Movie Night. Because this movie is very similar to Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, Casino. Those are all Martin Scorsese movies. This is not. This is by Palma or something is his last name. He has a bunch of other movies. I think he directed Carrie as well. Let me get the letterbox open. I don't know why we didn't have this open beforehand. My goodness. Elite RE giving Saving Private Ryan 3 stars. Roy Deschanel giving After Sun 5 stars. After Sun is a 2022 movie. Do we have to add this one to the watch list? Anyway, we're looking at Scarface here as I put it in the search bar. Also, I didn't realize that there is an older Scarface. This is kind of a remake of from 1932. I think Tony Soprano might have been watching this movie in The Sopranos, so I might have seen some stuff from it. Obviously, Scarface is supposed to be Al Capone, the movie is not an Al Capone biopic by any means, or dramatization. Because I know that, because I watch Boardwalk Empire, so I know everything about the mob, alright? Obviously, Al Capone is a big character in that. Incredible performance by, I wanted to say Toby Stevens. But that's the guy that plays Flynn in Black Sails. It's either Steven first name or his last name is also Stevens. The actor, he's also in The Irishman. See, it's all incestual. What was I saying? Incestual with Boardwalk Empire. Oh, but this movie isn't about Al Capone, though Al Capone was the real life, like, he has a scar on his face and he was called Scarface. And I think that 30s movie is a reference to Al Capone too, because he was around, he goes to jail at the beginning of the 30s, I believe, if Boardwalk Empire is to be believed. So it's a little bit after Al Capone, because that's a 33 movie I think I just saw. This is 83. Brian De Palma. I think that's how, I don't know how you fucking say it. Also, this is the first, I've always heard the name Michelle Pfeiffer. She's the lead girl in this. Actually, is the sister in it more than her? Is she technically the lead girl? Probably. That's a name you've always heard. I don't even have a face to put to the name, but now we do because we watched it. Now we're looking at Brian De Palma. Scarface is his most popular movie. He also did Carrie, as I said. He also did the first Mission Impossible. The Untouchables is another movie you hear a lot about. Carlito's Way is another big Al Pacino movie that maybe we could watch. Is it on the watch list already? No, it's not. It's 10 years after this one. He's Puerto Rican in this. I knew he was a different ethnicity. Al Pacino, not Al Capone, can do it all. I feel like there were other movies too that he's done. Anyway, we might check back in with this director later. I think we haven't repeated directors yet. I don't remember who did Roger Rabbit or Casablanca off the top of my head, or the blonde dude's name. But I know I added the blonde dude's other movies to the watch list since we loved it so much. But yeah, Carlito's Way seems interesting. It's another Al Pacino one. Obviously, they had fun doing this. Nonetheless, Scarface. We ended up, why we got Letterboxd up in the first place, we did end up only giving it 3.5 stars. It is the worst movie we've watched on movie night so far, according to myself. This movie was an odd one. It's interesting. We're like 15 minutes in, I feel like, and we're only just getting to this now. Let's see how much. We are nearly exactly 50 minutes into the recording, though it's probably like 13 minutes into the video. Enough with the pedantics. Jesus Christ. I was building up to a point before we get into it, is that I do have my notes here that Al Pacino might be my favorite actor. The Godfathers are obviously incredible. I love The Irishman so much, and he is my favorite performance in The Irishman. Though I love calm and stoic Joe Pesci, and Robert De Niro's there too. That wasn't a diss. I tried to use my inflection to show that wasn't a diss, but it sounded like I was like, oh yeah, and this idiot's here too. Not what I meant. Nonetheless, this fucking Al Pacino prick. I love it when he goes crazy. He's going crazy in this movie. And while this movie wasn't my favorite, I did very much like his performance and think it probably was the standout element. All the performances are pretty good. There's just some other factors that are, it's oddly corny in sections, which when I scrolled down and I had looked at some comments on some scenes on YouTube and the Letterboxd comments, there seems to be an embracing of how corny the movie is. I don't think its reputation is that it's very corny. I guess the most famous line from the movie is probably "Say hello to my little friend," and I guess that is corny. It's kind of an action movie line, like you could hear Arnold Schwarzenegger saying that almost. I can't even remember the Terminator line. Now, if "I'll be back" is his fucking line, I think. But yeah. And I see a lot of, in YouTube comments too, people saying that it's very 80s, which is interesting. I feel like out of like the decades, the 80s might be like the decade I've least consumed media from. Because I know everything about the 60s. I watched Mad Men. Things actually made in the 60s I haven't watched too much of. And I feel like I have a good grasp on, even as much of a meme as it is, the 60s through Mad Men or the 20s through Boardwalk Empire or things like that. I've seen a bunch of things from like the 40s now, I feel like. And things set in the 40s especially, and sort of wartime stuff, the 90s, a lot of stuff I've watched from that. I feel like my only connection to the 80s, really, besides this movie, I guess, is a lot of wrestling stuff. Now, I haven't watched too much wrestling stuff pre-80s, but a decent amount of 80s wrestling, a lot more 90s, probably more 2000s, and probably even more 2010s. 2020s, we're still getting there. We're only in the fucking second year, all right? Jesus Christ, we're nearly in the third year of the 2020s. What's going on? We're still waiting for 2020 to end. So yeah, when it's said the 80s aesthetic, it is sort of corny action movies, I feel like is what the 80s are kind of known for. I guess I'm not as in love with the aesthetic. Like even in the 70s, like I've listened to all those Pink Floyd albums, so it gives me sort of a mindset of what's going on there. I feel like I've seen a lot of other 70s stuff too. The 80s sort of feels like a blank spot almost. If it's just like, when I think of the 80s, I think of, and maybe this is just my bias for 80s wrestling, where I think it's kind of bland, because really a lot of the stuff I've seen is only WWF stuff at the time. I see it as like bland, and I think of it as like ultra conservative, peak conservative America, and sort of how that's referenced in, I guess, political discussions. I think Ronald Reagan is the president throughout all the 80s. Actually, let's fucking Google this. We got to be good with our Ronald Reagan, the 40th president of the United States. When was he serving, huh? Does it say presidential term? 81 to 89. Wouldn't you know who's a fucking genius and who knows everything about everything? That'd be me. I think this might be the first movie where we've rated it under the average rating too, because I'm seeing it's got a 4.1. What, does Blonde have, a 2? This fucking movie's the greatest thing I ever saw. Hold on, I want to see. I'm Googling now. Click on the fucking thing, you fucking idiot. It has a 2.1. My goodness gracious me. Greatest movie I ever fucking saw, especially on movie night. Though we did bump Casablanca also up to a fucking 5 stars. Did I mention that last time? I must have. Casablanca is now 5 stars. It was 4.5 throughout the whole review. How am I going to give the As Time Goes By movie fucking 4.5 stars? You fucking kidding me? We talked about tragedies. We talked about how much I like Al Pacino in this. We've talked about how much I don't like that movie that much. There's an oddness, especially about the final sequence. How do I don't know. It never elevates itself to me because I'm like, why is it only 3.5 stars? Why is it so bad? And I'm like, 3.5 stars is pretty good. But I guess I was disappointed. Maybe there's just... I feel like I did expect one of those Scorsese movies, I guess. And it is in a similar... I guess it predates all of them. So they all maybe took this sort of structure or this sort of tale of rise and fall. I guess Taxi Driver came out beforehand. Goodfellas is 1990, right? And then Casino is 95. Wolf of Wall Street is way later. So, though Scorsese is making movies at this time. I don't know if Taxi Driver is like that. I actually don't know that much about Taxi Driver at all, except for people comparing it to like the Joker. And Raging Bull is like another movie he'd made back then. Something like that. Maybe he was already doing those types of movies. And there's just something about it, like it just doesn't grip me, I guess. There's not a character I particularly like. I guess Tony is likable in his craziness and in his ambition. I guess Manny is likable in his douchiness. I forget the girl's name. Michelle Pfeiffer's character. She's likable in how mean she is. Obviously, I was going to like her. The sister is like, I guess the characters are likable. None of them really stood out to me. I don't know, as much as like Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street and Jonah Hill and Wolf of Wall Street, they're just like a must-watch, great chemistry when they're on screen and everything. Now, Goodfellas, I think I also gave 3.5 stars. I'm not that big of a fan of Goodfellas, but I guess I would say I like it more than this. But even then, I feel like the characters and sort of the plot grip you more. Casino, I think I like better than all of them. Maybe even Wolf of Wall Street. Probably not Wolf of Wall Street. But Ace Steel is very likable in that. That is his name, right? Robert De Niro's character in that. Nonetheless, there's something... maybe Martin Scorsese is as good as they say, and everything he touches is fucking great. And this is sort of you feeling the absence of a truly great director or something. Though we've only seen this one movie from this one, so we'll pass judgment. And I am interested enough to look at other ones. The way the movie is shot in an interesting fashion, I feel like it's really the plotting of it that's lets it down, I guess. I have a note later, which we'll bring up now, because what the fuck. The movie is shot interestingly, lots of pedantic long-range shots, almost gives it a casual feel in parts, a documentary feel, almost intentionally uncinematic. Now, this is actually something I liked about the movie. But there's a lot of wide shots of people walking, I guess. And I don't know, there's something about the feel of it that makes it feel a little mundane in a good way. We were talking about criticisms, but now I'm talking about something I liked. There's a quaintness to it. I'm trying to think of examples. I'm thinking of at the beginning when they're going in to do the initial dealings with the Colombians. I guess the camera feels stationary sometimes. And when they're entering places, I don't know. I feel like it holds on shots. I'm not going to figure out a good way to explain it. Maybe everybody that's seen this already knows all of this about it and can explain it better. But yeah, I guess we're talking about the criticisms. Oh, I guess this is kind of important to go over. The scenes I'd seen beforehand. Obviously, I know about Say Hello to My Little Friend. Everybody's seen that scene before. And him dying, falling into the pool of blood. Oh, well, he makes the pool a pool of blood, but he dies because he's got a million shots in him and he falls into the pool. Even that, the ending after that is kind of a little sudden, though I kind of do like that. Leading up to that is a little iffy. I'd seen the car chase scene at the end when he refuses to do the assassination and ends up shooting the other assassin. I had presumed, because I had seen that scene out of context, and it was a scene I'd watched a clip of on YouTube just because I was curious. I heard stuff about this Scarface, let's watch it. I assumed that was from like the very beginning of the movie, and it was interesting as it was progressing. I'm like, that scene still hasn't happened. And then slowly as the assassination plot came into being, I was like, okay, this is when it's going to happen, which is interesting. But yeah, it was interesting that I assumed that was an early scene of him sort of breaking in, rather than him already being a kingpin on top while he was doing that. But context changes things. I'd obviously seen the dinner scene where he says, I'm the bad guy. I've seen the Eric Cartman parodies in South Park of it. And obviously Razor Ramon, who was a big wrestler in the 90s in the WWE, is basically is Al Pacino's character. A lot taller. Scott Hall just died recently too. But yeah, his whole character in the WWF especially is a big reference to this movie. So especially that scene because he was the bad guy. So yeah, I'd known a bunch of stuff. Oh, and obviously, you piece of shit, what are you talking about? You fucking cockroach or whatever. That back and forth I'd seen before too. Though I think I'd forgotten about it until it was happening, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is from this movie too. I feel like with every movie we've done so far, with the exception of Blonde, we've sort of been like, oh, this is where that line comes from. I guess that was just Casablanca. I don't know if there's that many Roger Rabbit lines that are like, have stood the test of time in cinema perpetuity. Scarface is a bigger movie historically, probably. Definitely than Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit's better though. We gave that one 4 stars. Those were the scenes I knew beforehand. I don't like this movie that much. It's a bit cheesy at some points, especially the glasses inside at night shotgun Terminator dude. I think that dude single-handedly killed this movie. Like, it was so bad. Usually I go with things, especially when they're cheesy or corny. I'm like, whatever, I don't give a fuck about this. But this bloke, one of the assassins, also there's just so many dudes in that final sequence, which the excess is obviously evident, which is kind of thematically part of it, but it's like, man, they got a lot of blokes to show up to kill this dude. Now, obviously, they assumed that there'd be a lot more guards there, but he had sent them all off earlier that night, and there wasn't that many around. I get all of this. But, like, when you're trying to assassinate a dude, do you really send 50 fucking dudes in America? I don't know. It felt like a little bit like the Kill Bill scene. The Kill Bill scene also has somebody falling into the pool, right? And they're getting all bloody. Probably a reference to this movie. Kill Bill handles its cheese much better than this movie. I feel like there are a bunch of moments where it's like you sort of can't take this seriously, and it's sort of unintentionally funny. Like, there is a corniness in some of the line delivery sometimes, but this dude at the end is walking around Terminator dude. He's walking so slow. Like, we're getting dramatic musical cues when he shows up. He feels like the fucking Terminator. And he gets, like, no characterization. He's just there at the end to kill Tony. It's just kind of weird. There's a lot of weird stuff regarding the ending. Obviously, he figures out and we get confirmation that the sister and the best friend are sleeping together, Manny, and Tony shoots him. He's clearly in a coke haze. A lot of the ending of the movie feels like a dreamlike thing. Even the music that was playing, the music was very good in this movie, I must say. It's been described in YouTube comments I've read as synth 80s style music. I don't know shit about describing music, so I assume it's synth-related stuff. But the drumming sort of organ, I don't know if that's the right instrument. Don't ask me to identify instruments at all. I will never get it right. I failed fucking music class in the 3rd grade and failed at every grade since, like I'm still in school. From then on until I didn't have to take it anymore. I quit that shit. Nonetheless, it's like a drumming, it was going like that. Hopefully that picked up on the microphone. It might not have, but nonetheless, my beautiful humming. It sounds like a Death Note song, is my point. That was my note down here. The way the synth score was used was interesting too. Overpowering organ notes reminded me a lot of the Death Note soundtrack, weirdly enough. Then I went to look for which Death Note song it reminded me of. It's Rem's theme. It's a little different. Scarface's and Rem is like It's higher. You know, I can do inflection. I don't know, it sounds a little different, but it's the same, like, repeated drumming thing. I really like music like that. I feel like it adds that dreamlike atmosphere to things. Jealous is the name of the Shinigami that dies as Rem's music plays in like episode 16 or something of Death Note, when you're getting its backstory and how he loved Misa and everything. I remember that music playing then. Watch it not be that music in that scene, and I'm just making that up, but I feel like, yeah, man, that music goes off. And the music here, that especially when we were getting into those dreamlike coke hazes at the end, was very effective. But what wasn't effective, hold on, I guess I should finish reading the thingy. It overpowers the scenes in some parts to good effect, I feel, especially when everything becomes dreamlike almost at the end. Well, I'd already said that, Notes, you fucking idiot. Towards the end, like, him shooting Manny is so sudden, and then the sisters react. Oh, it's just all weird. It's like, not weird as in like the incest stuff is weird. I like that stuff, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And not like it comes out of nowhere. They're teasing that Manny and the sister are going to get together throughout the whole movie. Not throughout the whole movie. It's like 3 scenes where it's like teased. You're like, oh, here we go. That's easy drama. I see it. Not like that's a bad thing. That's not part of the criticism. Easy drama. I like that stuff. He like opens the door, and because you can tell, you're like, oh no, this is definitely Manny's place. He's not going to be happy. What's he going to do? And he just like shoots him, and it feels kind of pathetic. And his handling of his sister throughout the whole movie has been very pathetic, so it sort of fits in that angle. But like, he sort of doesn't realize it. And I do like the moment he has like a few scenes later where he starts to realize what he's been doing the whole night, and he freaks out about what he did to Manny. I do like that as a reference to it. But the way it's things, like he opens the door all smiling when it's like, obviously he's going to be mad. And then the sister comes out with like a smirk on her face, and she's like barely dressed. It's like, why are you doing this? Like you're infantilizing him. It's not the correct word. You're enticing him. That's not even the right word. You're like feeding into it. He's going to be mad. And then he shoots him. The sister comes running down the stairs, and she like cradles him, and it's all dramatic and stuff. But she's not like crying, and she like has she like turns to Tony and says, we were married yesterday or something. And it feels like, why aren't you screaming? And then she does scream a little bit later, but it's like so the scene just feels off. It feels like this is like a bad take and we should redo it. And I don't think it's like, oh, it's supposed to be like dreamlike, and so the acting is kind of awkward. It didn't have that sort of effect. Maybe people like this scene. I don't care. I don't mind, rather. It just feels really off, and what continues from there, it feels like that didn't just happen, and not in a good way. It feels like we should have hung on that for a little bit longer, and it's like, you're acting stupid. Why'd you do that? From all angles. And then she kind of fights him at the end, and then they're like carrying him through. They're carrying her out, and she ends up at the place. I know, there's just something about the build up to the end that's like, it just feels off to me. I guess I have to explain this better because I feel like everybody likes this movie, and they're going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's something I just can't explain about that. Like, that like left a bad taste in my mouth, and then we get to this Terminator dude, and it's like, I don't know about this ending here. Let me check in. This is all about his performance. Al Pacino might be my best actor ever, my favorite actor ever. This is different. This is a different role to anything I've ever seen him in before. The opening monologue is an example of how good he is. I kill a communist for free is a cute line. Though he does come back at that and says capitalism is about getting fucked later. And I like when he goes wild. Well, that doesn't have any criticism in it. But those are all my Al Pacino points. The ending sequence is kind of weird. The Manny death, the incest, which was teased earlier. That hug was a little too long. I guess we talk about the incest now. So at the end, after her fucking husband's been shot in front of him, they apparently put some pills into her, and she's all out of it. And she comes in, she starts shooting at her brother Tony here. And she's like, oh, you hate because there was a scene earlier in the movie where she was dancing with a dude in his club, and he wasn't happy she was there. Was that even his club? It might not have been, because he like arrives sort of as a guest at the club. And he is very mad at this. Initially, he sees them dancing, but then he sees them go into like the bathroom together. And then he's really not happy. And he actually does, like, he goes into it and breaks it up, but he doesn't like kill the dude or whatever, or even hit him. He just throws him, and then he ends up hitting the sister. So like he's been very protective of her. And she basically says at the end, like, oh, you're just protective over me because you want to fuck me. It's like, oh no, it's his sister, his kid sister, as they bring up throughout the movie, which is kind of weird. Now, when we first meet her, now he says in the opening monologue that he doesn't have any family in America, but then like 30 minutes into the movie, he goes to visit his family in America. And now we haven't actually seen him for a long time, and he hasn't visited them in a long time, but he's come to give them money. And his mother hates him. He's like, you're disgusting, you give Cubans a bad name, you're a fucking terrible person, fuck off. But the little sister is like enthralled by him. Now when he first opens the door, he says hello to Ma, and then the sister is there. He's like, oh, you were this tall when I saw you last. And then they hug, and the hug is a little too long. There was something else recently. I can't remember if it was in Blonde or something, or was it in House of the Dragon or something, where there was like a hug initially that's too long, and you start to, this hug is a little too long. These two are definitely fucking at some point, or there's some feelings there. So immediately, because they don't actually say that it's his sister immediately, you're like, oh, is this like his wife from back in Cuba that now lives with his mother, and it's going to be a sort of a Boardwalk Empire episode 2 thing? That's exactly what it is. In Boardwalk Empire episode 2, or it might be in episode 1, we see Jimmy with his like girlfriend, with Ange, I love Ange, and his kid, Tommy. We love Tommy come the end. God, Boardwalk Empire, what a television program. And then he goes and meets this other girl who he like hugs for a long time, who jumps into his arms. He's like a showgirl, and you're like, oh, this is like his side squeeze or whatever. I've never said squeeze in my life, but there you go. I'm in the 20s Boardwalk Empire fucking vibe with the vernacular here. And she like jumps into his arm, is like hanging off of him and everything, and you're like, ugh. And then then like a minute into the scene, it's revealed that she's his mom. And then later it's revealed that there's some weird incest stuff going on there, some weird sexual abuse stuff going on there. Because even later, there's like a scene before it's revealed that there's sexual abuse going on. There's like tension between them always. And she has that scene with Ange where she's like, oh, when Jimmy was younger, because she's got a baby too, I used to kiss his winky or whatever. And you're just like, this could just be some weird motherly love shit. But then it's some weird motherly love shit when we get that college flashback episode and they have sex. Spoilers for Boardwalk Empire. Kind of the big thing at the end of season 2. Big spoilers. Do I like that I said that? Anyway, just like that in this, the initial like hug is a little bit too long and you're like, yeah, a little weird. Is this like his side squeeze or his girlfriend from back in Cuba? And then it's like sister. Now, fucking your sister is more understandable than fucking your mom. I love Jamie and Cersei. I don't give a fuck about this incest shit. They can fuck if they want. But the funny thing about it, come the end, because I rewatched the scene of her, because she ends up shooting Tony at the end. She doesn't kill him, just the initial bullet. And then she gets shot up and gets killed. And also, that seems really sudden. The ending of this movie is a bit of a sprint, a little bit of a blur. We don't like it. We've established that already. But yeah, she's like, you want to fuck me, Tony? I know it. And it's like, I guess in the dreamlike sequence, it's kind of like, is it his brain saying this or whatever? And obviously, like throughout the movie, it's like built up that he has this toxic defense of her. Now, fathers and older brothers especially have this sort of toxic protection of and this sort of cringeworthy protection, obsession with their younger sister or daughter's sex lives, because they see them as an extension of their own pride and stuff like that. Either this is an acute psychological like commentary of like the reason why people do that is because they want to fuck them, which would be some funny Freudian shit or something. Or it's just like a what's the other option? Or it's just a particular like Tonyism in this movie that he likes his sister. Now the sister is remarkably hot. She is very attractive, as is Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. Every fucking dress that Michelle Pfeiffer wears in this fucking movie has a fully exposed back. So I was fucking living in bliss. My back fetish was going through the roof in this movie. Also this movie, while we're sexualizing everybody and being highly inappropriate, never in my life have small boobs looked so good. Not that small boobs are usually bad. We love small boobs, just as much as big boobs. Small boobs, big boobs, that's not what makes boobs better than each other. I don't know, just the dresses or something. Maybe this is how it was in the 80s. None of them have got bras on underneath. The way they hang and stuff, my goodness, I was looking a little bit. Nonetheless, both the girls, incredibly attractive in this movie. Backs exposed constantly. Maybe this fucking De Palma dude or whatever is suffering from a similar affliction to me with this back fetish nonsense. But my goodness, these dresses were all great. Boobs and back. So the sister is very hot. I don't know what it's like. I don't have a sister at all. I wonder if you have a hot sister. If it's like having a hot cousin where you're like, maybe. But no, that'd be wrong. But maybe. Especially if your sister's that hot. I don't know. I don't know the weirdness of ever having a sister. I have a brother, but sadly I'm not gay to test this theory. Kid sister too, that's even more problematic. Cersei and Jaime were twins, alright? That's completely fine. That's literally the hypothetical in which incest could be fine, except for them kids. A Joffrey bastard, literally, kind of fucked things up. Probably shouldn't have done that. Probably should have pulled out. Then Robert would have been angry at things, and therefore we're kind of endorsing Cersei to be raped by Robert, but aren't we already doing that with how marriage works in feudal society? Oh my goodness, this patriarchy is terrible, we gotta overthrow this. Dornish law? We love Game of Thrones here. Not to devolve. Nonetheless, sister hot. So maybe he wants to screw his sister. But the funny thing is, I watched that scene on YouTube. I began telling this story about 5 minutes ago. We got sidetracked with beautiful boobs and back shots. And by back shots, I mean literal shots of backs. I have to come up with a better word for that. Because that is a different meaning, if you didn't know. YouTube video, I was watching it, and every fucking comment was a passionate defense about how Tony does not want to fuck his sister. It was the biggest copium wave I've ever seen in my life. It was just like, the writers just put this in there to show that Tony was just protective of her in a very sweet brotherly way, which is already like problematic. These comments are endorsing his fucking incredibly toxic protection of her sexuality for no good reason. And then they're adding onto it this fucking, he definitely didn't want to fuck her, guys. I don't know why this scene was there. The writers just wanted to leave it open-ended, I guess. I promise. I don't know, maybe it's maybe there's a lot of Tony Montana fans. I feel like I'm saying that name wrong every time. If I said it in an accent, I feel like it would be racist, but I might get closer. Nonetheless, Montana is what we're keeping with, like the state. I know my US states. I don't know if there's a lot of projection onto him, like he's Don Draper or Tony Soprano or anybody who's a toxic Eren Yeager, any toxic masculine. I wasn't even trying to make a toxic masculinity joke there. It's not really a joke either. It's just a point. Toxic masculine figure, power fantasy type bloke. And there's a lot of like worship of him too, and secretly the whole fan base really likes him. And like they're like, I don't want to fuck my sister either, guys. I don't want to. It's sort of this weird projection, thou dost protest too much type shit. But those comments were weird because my takeaway from this movie was that he absolutely, well and truly, 1 million quintillion bajillion %. That's a lot of bajillions. He wanted to fuck his sister, I guarantee it. So that's my read on the movie. Maybe that's also controversial. I feel like we're asking for some hate on this movie night review. And honestly, I don't know how much I have left to talk about this movie. There are a bunch of cute scenes that we could talk about. There's the How to Pick Up Girls scene with Manny, where it's like, dude, this dude is the hottest fucking actor I've ever seen. There's no way he has to have lines with girls. But nonetheless, to be relatable to us everymen, he's trying to pick up Miami girls, and he thinks all he has to do is stick his tongue out and wave it like he's going to eat them out, and they're all going to fall over him, but he gets slapped. It's kind of cute. These idiots don't know how to pick up girls at all. And before that, Tony is trying to pick up a girl. There's a lot of lust, because obviously all of these movies, and by them I mean all the other Scorsese movies that I mentioned, not that this is one, but in a similar vein, these modern tragedies, as we're calling them, they have sort of the wanting everything, then getting everything. So there's a lot of them like, look at the tits on that girl or whatever, unironic memery, which is kind of funny. It feels very 80s when all the flirting that happens, there's a lot of touching and feeling, which is not allowed anymore. Like the scene at the beginning. I guess this is a scene we can talk about. The fucking chainsaw scene from the beginning. That was some crazy shit. And outside, the Manny is like fingering this girl's fucking bikini. Not actually fingering her, but fingering the bikini, and like he's being very touching. He's like, man, 80s were a wild time. Jesus Christ. Tony also has moments like that where he's like forcing himself on his to-be wife in the car, and she's like, I like her repeated berating of him, like, even if we were on a deserted island, you'd be the last guy I fucked or whatever. That was all cute. And her rejection of the car initially and everything, and him going immediately to buy a new car, and his sort of just like puppy dog obsession with like changing everything to her whim. God, the relationship in this movie is so... It's not even as bad as, like, Casino, where for a second they kind of seem like they get along, and they both seem strong independently almost, and it's obviously a train wreck towards the end. But at this point, they don't have really, like, one loving moment. Like, when he puts the hat on in the car and she smiles, after he tried to force himself on her, mind you. That's kind of cute. But other than that, she's scrumpy the whole movie, which I like. The performance-wise, I think it's cool, and obviously that's the point, that this marriage is like never going to work. I guess the point of the movie is that Tony Montana is very dumb and very smart in some ways. In like, I guess he's very ambitious and a man of action. He tries to put the deals together. He tries to undermine the deals when they first go to Bolivia to meet with Sosa, is his name, and they kill the one dude. There's a lot of very visceral violence, like the chainsaw thing at the beginning where that dude's arm and leg are chopped off. That you don't see it, you just see the blood and everything. But that is like, that sequence at the beginning, the action choreography, as I put in quotes, of that scene at the beginning is really cool. Where like a dude gets shot, but then he comes back and he's like fumbling around. I don't know, there was something that felt, I guess, again, realistic more so, with even, because we were talking about this with the shots earlier, where they were like, all like mid-range and long-range shots in there. Not all of them, but like I remember like long range shots of the whole room, and this dude gets shot over here and this dude bubbles in, and then this one comes in and there's like waves of dudes. I felt like that was, I guess, more realistic because he gets shot and then it's if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about here, or maybe you don't and I'm just fucking up. We were connecting and the dude getting hung out of the chopper and stuff. There's sort of these visceral violence moments that I feel like probably have lived in perpetuity, sort of in mob movie zeitgeist. Goodfellas isn't that violent. It's sort of when Joe Pesci gets shot. It's one of those for Goodfellas, I guess. That's kind of a violent scene. I remember somebody getting skewered as they're sitting in the seat of the car. Like, The Godfather isn't that violent. Casino's a little violent sometimes, huh? We're comparing violences here too. Scarface, obviously. Scarface, you're thinking of all the blood. It is a lot more gruesome than those movies, I'd say. I think this movie was rated R in Australian, which is obviously different all over the world. Because in America, you've got like unrated and then like AV or something that's higher, and then PG goes up to PG-13, but that's M here. But there's also an M in the American system, which is like mature, which is like above R, I think. Or maybe that it's M is 17 plus and R is 18 plus, or I don't know how these fucking rating system works. G means general. That's what like the Piglet movie is, unless it has cartoon violence. In that case, it would be PG, but we don't have PG-13. Anyway, it's a violent fucking movie was the point. Poignantly violent in some violent in some places. Those are all the notes. I mentioned the how to pick up girls scene, the all the violent scenes. What else is there to go over? Honestly, I'm left for a little lull here. If we scroll down, we see Krasdorf gave it 2.5 stars, and Adam from Your Movie Sucks has watched it. Interesting stuff all round. Popular reviews. The mountain of cocaine on Tony's desk, that's a metaphor for what the entire movie feels like. Is it? I didn't feel like this movie's like a sprint or anything. I will say in favor of the movie, it is like 3 hours long, but I was never bored throughout it. It didn't connect on any higher level than like 3.5 stars, I guess. I feel like all my favorite scenes might be to do with Michelle Pfeiffer being grumpy. Like, I feel like when he's in the bath, and he's got like the pillow behind him in the bath hot tub thingy, and she's like doing a nail at the back and like back chatting him. I think that's cute. All that stuff was funny, nonetheless. 4 stars. He did indeed have a scar on his face. Well, it's nice to know that even Letterboxd reviews can be as annoying, mundane, and say the same fucking annoying ass or repeated ass jokes as YouTube comments can. 4.5 stars. There's a lot on Scarface that hasn't been said already. It certainly still packs a punch of sheer boldness and excess, and De Palma is in full control of his operatic ambitions. But there's still some scenes that are generally chilling. Pacino delivers one of his most iconic performances. He really is mesmerizing. Slightly ridiculous ending. I guess some people might think the ending is a little weird too. Is the only sticking point I have, but this is still a very fine addition to the crime genre. Between the insane, incredible lines of melodrama, which is a caricature of themselves. Oh, a big thing we didn't talking about, and I did feel that in some sections, like, oh, this movie kind of suffers of being parodied a million times and being made fun of a million times and being iterated on a million times, where it can sort of feel generic, even if it is the originator in some sense. About 2.5, I was going to say 2.5 quarters, and then 2.5 hours is too far in. Probably about 2 hours in, a little over the halfway point, we get a fucking montage to, Push It to the Limit, I think is what the song is called, which is like the quintessential meme montage song that's like in YouTube video parodies or just like YouTube skits. They'll use that song all the time to do an over-the-top montage to make fun of montages. So it was kind of unbelievable that it was happening in an actual movie. Now, obviously, I got over this quickly. This isn't an actual like point of criticism or anything. It was just cute and funny that, like, oh, I guess this is where this comes from. Because it is like a 80s over-dramatic, silly bop. As they're, like, hauling money into the fucking bank and stuff like that. It feels like it's like the Curb Your Enthusiasm moment. Where I watched, like, the first episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and then I didn't realize until, like, it finishes in that fucking dumb song that is overused unfunnily in a million memes you've seen over and over again, and it plays at the ending like, oh, this isn't a meme, this is like the originator, so I shouldn't bring all this baggage of how much I hate this dumb fucking song into this. And usually I can separate it pretty easily. I'm not going to think any Curb Your Enthusiasm episode is worse, even though I've only seen the first two. Well, I've seen the special and then the first two real ones. I should get back on Curb Your Enthusiasm. What a fun show that was. But nonetheless, it was almost a moment like that where it's like, this is so iconic and so has lived on past the movie almost, that it's like, oh my god, this is like the originator. That's insane. Hold on, let me take a drink. What else is there to say? We haven't talked about Frank too much. He has an interesting character, one of the better performances in the movie. I guess he has like the weeping scene where he gets shot at the end when he's undermined and killed. I do like that he's kind of like nice to Tony initially, and immediately in the car ride home, Tony is like, he's soft, and clearly he's gonna like take over for him. Also in the to continue on the Tony is terrible with women meme, in the car afterwards, after she like curses him out, he's like, I think she likes me, man. You could tell in the eyes or something, they never lie or something. And it's just like, man, what an idiot. But yeah, it's sort of immediately, because when you meet Frank Lopez, you're like, oh, this guy's alright. But Tony's read, and he has like a cold face the entire time he's talking to him. There is an aspect of like, I guess it's just hubris, where Tony is like uncompromising with people, especially where he just can't get along. It's sort of like he can't bullshit. I think that's a through line, right? He has a line in this movie about, I always tell the truth. Either when I lie, I'm telling the truth, or something like that. That's one of the lines from the movie that I think is pretty iconic. Which is kind of true. He's just like straight face, like he gives it to you straight every time. There's no little lying. Even later when he like gets, he's like, oh, you're gonna have to do at least 3 years on tax evasion. He's like, no, I'm not fucking doing that or whatever. He's just very stupid and like strong-headed and stubborn in some ways, which it's all interesting for his characterization and interesting to see play out. That's one of those dumb meme songs that's stuck in my head right now. That's not the Curb Your wait, no, that is the Curb Your Enthusiasm one. Never mind. It is interesting that it is that long, and I don't even know if I ever checked the time thing. I was just so enthralled. Maybe I did love the movie after all. Not really, though. Is 3.5 stars too much? It might be a 3-star movie, guys. I don't know. I am curious, more so than any other one in the past. Sort of comments and retorts almost in the comments section. I'd be curious what the people love about this movie so much. Even a good test. And I usually do this after I finish everything, and especially with these movies, I usually first Google Scarface reaction to see the reaction videos and things like that, to see which channels have reacted to it and how many views a usual reaction to it gets, to sort of tell how much how popular it still is. And then I usually type in just like Scarface video essay, and there weren't that many of either of them, which I thought was interesting. I'm interested, like, how it's talked about in sort of video essays, whether or not, like, most people really like this movie, because it has a 4.1 here, and that's pretty high on Letterboxd, and whether or not it's just, like, the peasant casuals that like this movie, and it's sort of derided in video essay sort of spaces. I'm trying to think of another movie that's like that. I really can't think. Blonde's hated by everybody, except for me, chat. Blonde a lot better than Scarface, I'll tell you that much. Uh-oh. That's a take out of context post on Twitter, laugh at Kyle Entertainment line, if ever I've heard one. Blonde is still the best movie we watched here on Movie Night. We'll see if we can ever overthrow it. Maybe Gaslight will do it next week. We'll have to see. But yes, tell me what the people, the peasants, think about Scarface in the comments below. So I think we're ending things here. Gross, I'm burping. Incredible backs all throughout the movie. Greatest thing about the movie. Then the soundtrack. Then Al Pacino. Then the rest of it. With that being said, again, everybody watch Gaslight for next week. I wonder if Gaslight will have everything to say about it. Because with those first two movies, I was like, I could go on forever about these two fucking things, and the last two have been shorter. I think they're both around 50 minutes, right? But nonetheless, don't want to overstay our welcome too much. So we don't want to drag this shit out. So, Scarface, 3.5 stars, maybe 3 stars from me. I'll think about it a little more. I'll probably watch some reaction videos or something. Maybe I'll watch some video essays. Maybe I'll read some comments. Maybe it'll convince me one way or another. Tony definitely wanted to fuck his sister. Stop coping. And watch Gaslight for next week. With that being said, we're ending things here for episode 4 of Movie Night. Support links in the description below. Thanks.